One of the most cited political philosophers during the founding era was Montesquieu. He lived in the late 17th, early 18th century in France and wrote a book called The Spirit of the Laws. One of the ideas that he put forth in that book was that big countries will be powerful on the international stage, but despotic at home. So if you imagine 18th century France or Russia as examples. Small countries, on the other hand, will be weak on the international stage, but will guard better the liberties of their citizens. So if you think about the Swiss cantons or the Dutch states of the day. This system, the U.S. Constitution, attempted to gain the advantage of a large country, and the United States at the time extended from Maine to Georgia, from the Atlantic seaboard to the Mississippi River, while maintaining the advantages of small countries. In other words, each state would control its internal policy, and the general government had no control over the internal policy of the states. Having the national government handle defense and international affairs and leaving the states to handle their internal affairs was important in the decision to ratify.
On the difference between state and federal legislature. The objects of the former are narrow and limited to state and local affairs. The objects of the latter are coextensive with the continent. Should Congress exercise any power not vested in them, it will be a usurpation of the rights of the different state legislatures, who would sound the alarm to the people. Should a struggle actually ensue, it would terminate to the disadvantage of the general government, as Congress would be the object of the fears and the state legislatures the object of the affections of the people.
According to Nicholas, the national government needed to have national level powers like defense or foreign affairs. However, if the Congress should attempt to exercise a power not enumerated in the Constitution, it would be a usurpation, and the people would resist that usurpation. The fact that resistance was possible as a disincentive to the federal government to try to use a power not enumerated, because it would precipitate a conflict, and according to Nicholas, the people would support their states against the general government.
The people can, when they please, change the government, being possessed of the supreme power.
The point Nicholas is making here is that the people possess the supreme power and they can change governments when they want to. The peoples of the states assembled in convention and ratified the Constitution, or not, and nobody could overrule them because the people are supreme.
I should understand a consolidated government to be that which should have the sole and exclusive power, legislative, executive, and judicial, without any limitation. Is this such a government? Or can it be changed to such a one? It only extends to the general purposes of the Union. It does not intermeddle with the local particular affairs of the.
There was a lot of concern about whether the Constitution would create a so-called consolidated government. Montesquieu had said that a country as large as the U.S. that was consolidated would inevitably be despotic. Advocates countered that this was not a consolidated government because the federal government had only specified powers, leaving the states to run their internal affairs. In other words, the limitations on federal power were key to this government being acceptable.
In some respects it is a government of a federal nature. In others, it is of a consolidated nature. Even if we attend to the manner in which the Constitution is investigated, ratified, and made the act of the people of America, I can say, notwithstanding what the honorable gentleman has alleged, that this government is not completely consolidated, nor is it entirely federal. Who are parties to it? The people, but not the people as composing one great body, but the people as composing 13 sovereignties.
There was debate over the Constitution about whether this was a federal government or a consolidated government. Opponents called it a consolidated government and said it was not fit to be ratified. Madison responded to this debate. According to Madison, because the people of the states acting in their sovereign capacity had ratified the Constitution, it was not a consolidated government.
Were it, as the gentleman asserts, a consolidated government, the assent of a majority of the people would be sufficient for its establishment. And, as a majority have adopted it already, the remaining states would be bound by the act of the majority, even if they unanimously reprobated it. Were it such a government as is suggested, it would be now binding on the people of the state, without having had the privilege of deliberating upon it. But, sir, no state is bound by it, as it is, without its own consent.
In other words, this is not a consolidated government because it only applies to those states that ratify it. And the people of those states are the supreme power in determining whether it does or does not apply to that state. Thus, the people of the states are sovereign. No one can overrule them, according to James Madison.
If Virginia was separated from all the states, her power and authority would extend to all cases. In like manner, were all powers vested in the general government, it would be a consolidated government, but the powers of the federal government are enumerated. It can only operate in certain cases. It has legislative powers on defined and limited objects, beyond which it cannot extend its jurisdiction.
Any state that did not ratify was independent of the other 12. In that case, the state government could do anything not prohibited by the state constitution. Madison further explained that this is not a consolidated government because all the powers of the federal government are listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and the federal government cannot go beyond those enumerated powers.
The liberty of the press is supposed to be in danger. If it ever will be suppressed in this country, the liberty of the people will not be far from being sacrificed. Here is the danger of it. Henry says that every power is given to the general government that is not reserved to the states. Pardon me if I say the reverse of the proposition is true. I defy anyone to prove the contrary. Every power not given it by this system is left with the states. This being the principle, from what part of the Constitution can the liberty of the press be said to be in danger?
One of the objections of opponents of ratification was that there was no Bill of Rights in the Constitution. No Bill of Rights was necessary, according to Edmund Randolph, to protect freedom of the press because the federal government had not been delegated any power over the press, and the federal government was going to be able to exercise only the enumerated powers delegated to it. Silence in the Constitution means the federal government has no power over the subject.
The powers of the general government are only of a general nature, and their object is to protect, defend, and strengthen the United States. But the internal administration of government is left to the state legislatures, who exclusively retain such powers as will give the states the advantages of small republics, without the danger commonly attendant on the weakness of such governments.
Montesquieu had said that large republics tend to be oppressive and small republics are vulnerable to international aggression. This Constitution gives the states the benefits of both. A large country for purposes of international affairs and a small country in terms of not being oppressive internally. The limitations on federal powers are essential in making this system safe to ratify.
The powers of the general government are only of a general nature, and their object is to protect, defend, and strengthen the United States. But the internal administration of government is left to the state legislatures, who exclusively retain such powers as will give the states the advantages of small republics, without the danger commonly attendant on the weakness of such governments.
In the state governments, certain things are reserved and everything that is not mentioned was given to the state government. In the federal government, the opposite holds true. Certain powers are given and everything that is not mentioned is reserved. So silence means denial of the power in question. Again, advocates of ratification assured their skeptical peers that the federal government could only exercise powers expressly delegated to it. New Hampshire wanted it on the record that all powers, quote, not expressly and particularly delegated, unquote, are reserved. The other amendments addressed standing armies, armed citizens, and religious freedom. This brings us to the halfway point in the Virginia Convention. So what are the implications of what is said so far? The founders believed that limitations on federal powers were what made the Constitution safe to ratify. If the Constitution attempted to exercise powers beyond those enumerated in the Constitution, its actions would be void and might even be resisted by the people, including the use of struggle, including armed struggle, in which the founders believed the states would have the advantage because they were closer to the people.